Sally actively participates in civic engagement by scheduling and attending constituent meetings with local, state, and federal representatives to discuss policy issues of importance to the community. Throughout her professional career, her community service advocacy relationships have been at the heart of opportunities to build partnerships. Sally will take this same approach to the Colorado General Assembly by working across the aisle to get things done. Please welcome Sally Boccella.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you tonight, and I hope I can earn your support. My name is Sally Boccella. I'm running for State Senate District 23 to be your authentic voice at the state capitol. As a constituent advocate, I've supported policy on mental health resources, economic opportunities, education funding, and environmental conservation on the federal, state, and local levels. I am committed to the issues that are important to this district. As an American, as a first-gen American and a first-generation college graduate, my father is an Italian-American immigrant, U.S. Navy veteran, and Purple Heart recipient. My mother is a first-generation American. Even though they were born on different continents, they both believed in the idea of the American dream. So together, they created a successful business, and but it came with its challenges. It was really hard for them to raise a young family and have a successful business that was open 7 days a week. So they decided, it was a strain on their relationship, so they got a divorce. And so my brother and I were raised by my mother. There were times where she had to work 3 jobs to provide for us. And it wasn't until she got a union job that she was able to afford an apartment and health care. Because of these experiences, it is really important to me that people have access to affordable health care, education, a living wage, housing, and there's benefits for our veterans. So as I know that being a representative is, you have to have an authentic, a commitment to service to be an authentic representative. So some of my service Andy had mentioned, but I've actually done some stuff with the Weld Food Bank, which I still do right now, and the League of Women Voters, Endangered Species Coalition, and several school districts. I live, work, and volunteer in this district. My children go to school in this district. We need a state senator that understands the power of building coalitions, collaboration, community engagement, and policy development. While I was Colorado Area Marketing Manager, I created strategic partnerships with local businesses, community members, and nonprofits to collectively see a vision of success for our communities. I want to take that same vision and skill set to the state assembly. I hope I can earn your support. I am caucusing. I have literature here and envelopes if you feel inclined to support me with donations. And please sign up for my mailing list to keep abreast of what I'm doing. Thank you so much for having me.
We have a few minutes. If someone of you would like to ask a question of Sally, I'm sure she'd be happy to answer.
I forgot to mention, I'm really excited that I've been supported with endorsements by Congressman Joe Neguse, the Attorney General Phil Weiser, our State Treasurer Dave Young, House Representative Dylan Roberts, Mayor Pro Tem of Broomfield, Galina Nicoll, and also the CU Region at Large, Leslie Smith. So I'm really honored, and I feel like I have some great support behind me. So let's take this and flip this district. Okay.
That's what I'm going to ask Andy. What are you going to do about school funding in Colorado?
Well, actually, so my district, we tried to pass a bond and a mill levy. We were awarded awarded, we were lucky, we were awarded with the best grant, $8.3 million. It was incredible. So there's conditions when you get the best grant. You have to match it. Well, unfortunately, we did not. So we lost the bond by 99 votes, and we lost the mill levy by 3. Yeah, it was heartbreaking. And then, of course, we had to surrender that $8.3 million. But again, we are going to put that back on the ballot this coming election. And it was $28 a month. Now it's going to be more than that. We don't have the $8.3 million, but we're going to try and pass it because I think people realize, like, wow, we should have done that, you know? So and now Windsor, who's also in this district, it's Weld RE-5J, is going for the best grant. So I'm going to do everything I can to help them get it. But in regards to funding, I know you're going to ask about Tabor. And Tabor is a very challenging issue, but I was just talking about this the other night. The only way that we're going to get past Tabor is, again, by bringing people to the table. Because just Democrats trying to make something happen is just not going to work, at least not overnight. You need to bring business leaders together. You need to bring both parties together. You need to bring community members together to solve these problems. And so it will take time. I think we'll get past it. But in the meantime, we should be thinking of innovative ways to create funding, whether it's through the best grant, whether it's through bonds, mill levies. But the problem, the real thing is that we have to educate our community members, our neighbors, how important it is to fund our schools. Because our schools, that is the heart of our communities, and for a thriving future. So even local businesses and senior citizens who don't have children in school anymore, it's still, you're investing in your community. And it's important.
So I guess what I'm wondering though is if you're in the state legislature, how big a priority how will education?
It will be a big priority. I just met, so at my meet and greet on Frederick on Monday, I just met someone who is a representative for the Colorado Education Association. She came all the way up from Littleton because she knows it's important to me. So we're going to work together and we're going to figure out how we can make this happen. Because education is really important to me on so many levels. So we will get it done, but together. You know, one person, one party is not going to make that happen. We have to do it together. So thank you for that question.
Okay, we'll take one more question. Yes.
I am a retired medical social worker, and I'm very, very interested and concerned about healthcare issues. And you're probably aware that last year the General Assembly did pass a study to look at Colorado developing a public option, and that draft has been prepared by Healthcare Policy and Financing, and my understanding is the bill is getting ready to drop at any moment now. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about the public option and other healthcare ideas.
Well, I've been an advocate for mental health resources, so I think that that's something we have to really, really put a lot of focus on. Again, because of we need common sense gun safety laws, but we also need mental health resources. Suicide is one of the highest in our state, in the country, and so that is very near and dear to me. I have students in schools, but regardless, loss of life, we have to prevent it. So in regards to the public option, I have been working with Representative Dylan Roberts we work together on the Youth Prevention Act, Mental Health Prevention Act, and so now he's part of the public option. He's a sponsor, and so I think that opening it up to other providers, especially in rural areas, because a lot of these rural areas only have one provider. How's that competition? It's not. So that's the one thing I do like about it. I want to do more research to really make a decision on if I'm 100% for it, or if it needs to have some tweaking. But I trust Dylan. He really has his pulse on it. I mean, he's done some amazing work at the legislature. So yeah, and he welcomes people's opinions. He welcomes feedback and even suggestions. So I do feel good about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. to be allowed in the big meeting? Or do you have to? Okay, if you can stay around, then please ask more questions of Sally if you have them. I'd like to introduce Dr. Galina Nicoll. She is a University of Colorado professor and first-generation immigrant from Belarus, who recently became a U.S. citizen. A Broomfield resident for 10 years, Galina has been involved at the city and county level to prohibit further oil and gas development, increase local control, and ban fracking. She is running for state senate to provide more funding for K-12 and higher education, and to improve healthcare solutions. Galina intends to confront climate change by reducing carbon emissions and banning plastic. She will also lead the effort on humanizing the immigration process and will fight to improve our transportation infrastructure and housing options. Welcome, Dr. Galina Nicoll.
Good evening, fellow Broomfield Democrats. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, and I am here to introduce myself and my candidacy for the senator seat representing this district. So I will mostly speak of things that maybe will introduce me for the first time. Mind you, this is my first political speech. So even though I've spoken before in other political engagements on behalf of other people, including Joe Negus, who's my colleague at the University of Colorado when we were students. We've worked together with Ron Tupa on, Senator Ron Tupa, who's my campaign advisor there in the back, on several pieces of legislation that we've passed successfully. Nonetheless, this is my first time, so I will mess up. I just wanted to say, first to acknowledge an absolutely stunning candidate here who will be a fine representative for our district, and I think that we are strengthened by competition and in numbers, but I definitely want to give my head out and thank you for your service as well. But I'll start with my name, how's that? So, my name is Sergeychik, try saying that. Easy, right? Yeah. They didn't fit it on my immigration certificate because it's too long. It's SIERGIEJCZYK-Nicoll. And it's actually Nicoll, that's Scottish, that's my husband's last name. Yeah, so I ended up with just Nicoll. That's how you'll see me because it just wouldn't fit on the certificate of naturalization. So a few words about me. I'm Belarusian by my birth. I'm Polish by my ethnic background. And I'm a very, very recent US citizen as of September 23rd. It feels quite amazing, frankly, to be standing here in front of you all and to claim this kind of participation in a democracy. Having been raised in a communist country where this is not even a dream for so many people. This means a lot, and I couldn't wait to engage fully, to vote. Yeah, I participated in our city and council election right away. I was there, I got my sticker. And so this means a terrific, this is a terrific and powerful opportunity for me to speak on behalf of fellow Broomfielders, fellow Coloradans, whose concerns about the current administration have been my concerns as well, because I've lived this as first a tax-paying member of Colorado, and then of course a legally naturalized citizen. So a few words about what I do. What do I do? I teach at the university. I teach Russian language, literature, space exploration, a number of things really, but I also contribute on an incubator, an innovation incubator that provides mental health solutions for our students. As Sally rightfully pointed out, we are amidst an epidemic among our students who are, quite depressed and anxious and suicidal and otherwise on their phone. And they, as I mentioned to some of you in my introduction, looking at words like civic rights movements and war in Vietnam or 9/11, they see words on a PowerPoint. And I have lived through this with the United States citizens. I was here in 2001, and I remember the towers falling, and I was weeping with all of you. So for me, this means a lot. I live here in Broomfield, sort of around the corner, on this patch of lonely apartments right next to the E470, and I've been watching the frac pads populate us. And I've been having a problem with this. And I've been visiting with the city of Broomfield Council regularly, speaking up on those matters and others, protecting the eagle nests and listening to the parents whose children continue to have more and more toxic chemicals in their blood by week, and they've been doing it for 3 years. So I just cannot sit idly by. I have to stand up. This is just one of many things that I find need solutions. So I'll tell you just a little story about what it's like to grow up in a communist land. And I was reminded very recently reading a book that my student handed to me. It was called Red Notice, if I don't know if you're familiar, written by Bill Browder, former CFO of Hermitage Fund, who has lived in Moscow in the time of transition when oligarchs have taken over, and has miraculously escaped with most of his team, but leaving one to a total loss to an oligarchs and a corrupt government that has murdered the person whose bill was in a detention center. So reading this book, I was reminded about the value of democracy of this land, because a very powerful and inspiring man, our lovely President Obama, has actually made it law to prohibit people like Russian oligarchs on the list from traveling and enjoying the freedoms in America freely, like they always do, coming to shop in Hollywood. And in this book too, I was reminded reading it how I as a young adult would be traveling on a trolley, looking outside of the window and seeing a prison, a wall covered with people trying to crawl over a protest about a recent detention of another journalist of the week. And sort of moving on, driving on in the bus or the trolley, sort of thinking, okay, what's for dinner? And of course, for dinner was also a problem in a country that has just fallen off completely. And this reminded me of the sensation of how we normalize things that aren't normal. And I wept for 2 weeks. I couldn't stop. It all came back. And I find that it's not normal what we've been living here through. It's not normal to wall people off. It's not normal to have to spend all of your salary to just work having a child. It is not normal to not be able to afford a drug that you need that now suddenly costs thousands of dollars. It is not normal to exclude people from participation based on the color of their skin or the limits of the city or the district that they live on, or because they're too old. It is not normal. And that's what stirs me to come to this race and to participate. So with these thoughts and emotions and passions, I likewise bring to the table quite a bit of civic engagement and process that I've been through back in Belarus, in Poland as a student, and here as a citizen, and before I was a citizen, as a very involved and active graduate student government leader, nonprofit organizer, political servant, and I'm happy to represent this district in a most meaningful way, arguing and helping to build the kind of legislation that supports education. Because if teachers are underfunded, guess what? They will not put their heart into the education. And guess what will come out of this education? Exactly what we have in our hands now. I am a living example of a teacher who has a PhD and feels like she missed a bus because my salary is slightly over $2,000 and I can't afford to feed my family. My husband, a 2-tour Iraq honorably discharged veteran, combat veteran, out of a job for several months. I have to register in the fish food bank, which was lovely. I got to meet the most amazing humans who support everybody else in our community and pass on a legacy of inclusion, of connecting to the services that are available. So as your representative, I will invest in opportunities, in programs that provide support for those who aren't able to provide for themselves. To slightly upset the thing that's been going on here for a while, where the corporate interest who's polluting is sponsored by our tax dollar. Like, that's not normal. I will likewise invest time and effort in creating mental health solution. I find that this is something that is really bothering our state. I find it not normal and unacceptable that certain drugs that are on Schedule 1, that are plants, the Schedule 1 does not include opioids, or sugar for that matter. Somebody's interest in keeping us sick, in keeping us unhealthy, addicted to heavy drugs. These things are problematic and they require solutions. And I'm not saying that I'm going to be there to solve them all, but I will give it a good start. So thank you all for having me here and for allowing me to introduce myself. I will, obviously, as my first political speech, as I mentioned, will develop the full process. There are some pieces of information flyers on the table in my news release. And if you have any questions or ideas, suggestions, I'm happy to hear you. So come on over, introduce yourself if I haven't yet shaken your hand. Thanks so much. Sure.
Okay, I think we have time for at least, let's do 2 questions as we did before, and then, are you able to stay after the meeting?
Yes.
Okay, then we'll do that as well. Mr. Hutter.
Dr. Nicoll,
Yes.
I assume almost no people in the Colorado legislature have your background as in those. What can you say about your experience there? And I don't know whether you were there 1 year or 20. Helps inform you about this country and how the Colorado legislature can benefit from your different experience.
Oh, absolutely, great question. So when I was about 17 years old, I witnessed one of our first elections. It was one of the rounds of the government trying to come up with a form of governance for the state that was a state with no name. It was an overnight thing that happened, the Galactic Union, where suddenly there was no country, no flag, no government, no money. Nobody knew what to do, and we witnessed several stages of elections that were hosted in various schools, including one of them was mine. And we knew already by then that in our case, democracy that this country was pretending to be was dependent on who was counting the votes. It was sort of a fill-out ballot in a school. And later, of course, to this day, we have the last standing dictator in Europe who is governing the country. Lukashenko is his name, or the president, Lukashenko. And he, of course, devises laws and regulations daily, coming up with acts that incriminate you for simplest things, the show trials, sort of reminiscent of Stalin era of the 1930s, where you could be accused of stealing glue and get a criminal case and be imprisoned. So having seen this, having seen my fellow members of journalistic organizations back in Belarus who were part Polish, part Belarusian, engaged in civic activism, who landed in prisons for their activism, I know that here it is essential to step up. It is essential to share a broadened perspective that is inclusive. In this country, from my understanding, democracy is built, or at least in the Democratic Party's vision, on a wider appreciation of humanity, where we build our strength on including diverse layers of population, diverse representatives, the teachers, the workers, the union workers, the people who are involved in business, people who are involved in education, people who are involved in exploration and innovation. This state in particular, I find, is capitalizing on the wrong asset. We are sponsored by far, our CU, for example, institution, by NASA funding than any other institution nationally. There are other things that we can capitalize on in this state that will bring us prosperity, that will allow us to redistribute our wealth. CU Boulder, by the way, is guilty of nonprofit sharing, obviously. We have the top people at the top and then the bottom at the bottom. And so this needs to be addressed. And I find that my experience that is multicultural, that is internationally informed, will definitely contribute to a broader vision of inclusion that involves everybody, not just necessarily, the 1%.
mentioned you were against fracking, or you was like a ban. Are you prepared to talk to the people on the fracking tour along I-25 north
Yeah.
of here, the ones who in the past been in favor of fracking? Have you got your story down to what you tell me?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Yeah, how do you get a story down for people whose livelihoods depend on this as an industry, right? As their as a source of their bread. Yes, I understand it. Now, with this, I also understand that this would be a tour, if you wish, of reaching out and educating, perhaps, or sharing the research that is available. My father is a geologist, a hydrogeologist, who, by the way, went through the liquidation of the Chernobyl disaster, where they had to drill for water in the midst of total contamination. So, as a child, I've seen what happens when it all goes down. It goes down quickly, and there's nobody saved. It doesn't matter how wealthy you are or how far you could fly. Radiation sees no boundaries. Now, in our case, fracking, of course, contaminates differently. It does contaminate the air, it contaminates the soil, and it also contaminates the water. And so what I would have to say, of course, is it would be an invitation to look at the detrimental effects that are far more reaching than the immediate benefit for maybe a generation, the financial benefit of doing this. It's the devastation that is caused by fracking upon installation. 25% of these leak. Newest frac heads leak. So if you think you're living close to one and it's not a problem and you're okay, well, maybe it's not, super pleasant to look outside of the window and see the thing. Although for some of us it's a really disturbing sight. For me it is. Nonetheless, the seen and unseen consequences of having it are so profound, and you don't have to wait long. We will run out of tax-paying Coloradans before we can actually fill up on the benefits of it. So I would be reaching out in an invitation to consider the full impact of this, a larger scale. Because in this country, we assume stewardship of our nature. And one of the worst things that I've seen the current administration do is give up the sacred natural resources, the land, the public land that has been put into protection by the way, not only Democratic presidents, but also Republican presidents in the past. And to see it being wasted, for me, is a big concern. Thank you for the question.
Okay, we're going to move